Welcome to the 99 Podcast, a ministry of Crossroads Grace Community Church in Manteca, California. I'm Heather Mahoney, and I'm excited that you're joining us for Season 2 of the 99 Podcast. We hope it challenges you and creates a hunger to dive deeper into Scripture so you can know Jesus better. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm really excited for our conversation because we're diving into a topic that's both challenging and really deeply personal, pride and humility. And today we have Pastor Ed Applegate, who just shared a wonderful message from Daniel 4 about how God humbles the proud and lifts the humble. And in your sermon, Ed, I know you unpacked how pride can creep into our lives in surprising ways and how humility really is the key to truly seeing God as he is. And today we're going to go even deeper and we'll talk about subtle ways pride shows up, how God uses hard seasons to grow us, and some practical steps we can take to live with greater humility and freedom. I think everyone will be really encouraged by today's conversation. Ed, thank you for your sermon this week.
Well, thank you, and it's great to be back. Always love joining you in the podcast studio, this amazing place that we get to hang out in.
Yeah, I hope you guys have really grandiose views. We're definitely in a place where we're noise-free, but that's about as grandiose as it gets up here. But thank you guys for listening. Hey, Ed, you were pretty vulnerable at the end of this week's message, so I thought we might as well start with just asking some let's make Ed vulnerable and get to know him more questions. Are you cool with that?
I'm totally cool with that.
Okay, first question. Are you named after anybody?
Yes, I'm named after my grandpa, my mom's dad. His name was Edward Ernest, but none of us siblings have middle names, so I'm just Edward. But my mom would call me Edward Ernest all the time. So
all of your Applegate siblings, you guys just have first and last?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, what was your first paid job?
Well, it won't surprise anybody who knows me. My first job was actually I worked for a guy who was a property manager, and I kind of went around and fixed things that broke in his properties. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
fun.
what's one non-essential problem in life that you'd like to solve? And we're talking first world problems.
Yeah.
I asked something similar to Brian before, and I think he said he would have that everyone had to put their grocery carts away in the caddy.
Yeah. I would like, I hate sprinklers, and they never last more than a year. Like,
Okay.
I would love a sprinkler system that just lasted for 30 years. I would solve that problem. Definitely a first world problem.
Yeah.
Definitely a California problem.
Definitely a California problem.
You know what I mean? But
so many places I go, it's not like I've traveled everywhere, but when I just got back from seeing family in Washington, and most people don't even have sprinklers in their lawn. If it's green, it's green. If it's brown, it's not.
Yep.
It's not green. And I'm like, it can't be brown.
Exactly.
And here we are in a drought, and I'm
Yep.
wearing out our sprinklers.
Yep.
All right, two more. How long have you been married?
21 years just passed in July. So
Ooh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Did you do anything special for 20?
For 20, yeah, we were actually, it was pretty cool. When we were in England, we took the kids back to England, and we went back to Oxford on the day of our anniversary. And Oxford is where let's say sparks started to fly.
Gotcha,
So
yeah.
for our 20th anniversary, we were back in the place where sparks started to fly. So that's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, and then last one. When did you receive your call to ministry?
Oh man, this is a hard question because I never really got like a lightning bolt. It was more of a long drawing and courageous kind of finally getting up the guts to make the step.
That's a lot more realistic, so I appreciate that you have a very realistic version
Yeah, it was kind of, and even when I got out of seminary after thinking that I was called into ministry, and I didn't find a job for a long time, 5 months, and I thought, oh, well, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I wasn't called into ministry, but so I don't know. I guess maybe when I really sensed that, this is the thing is after those 5 months, I surrendered to God, and I just said, hey, if you want me in ministry, okay, but I'll do whatever you want me to. And it was just a really all-out surrender. And that week, Pastor Mike, who's the founding pastor of Crossroads, found my resume on the internet and emailed me and said, hey, would you be interested in a job at Crossroads?
Wow.
And it was just like so coincidental and then just to be hired a month later, it was just like, okay, I think God's called me to do this. You know what I mean? So yeah.
That's so cool.
But up until that point, it was like a 4 or 5 year journey of just like, I think God's leading me in this direction. So, yeah.
I remember having you guys over our house for dinner. I don't know if you remember that. And I'm this weird meat eater, right? I just like chicken breast, turkey breast, that's it. And I had to call my dad how to figure out how to cook the hunk of meat that I had gotten from at Costco. And I think I went and borrowed a meat thermometer and he told me when to take it out. And I said, I bought beef because Sean and I talked and it seemed like the right thing to buy. It's so funny. Gosh, that was so long ago. And so you've been on staff how long?
19 years. So that was 19 years ago.
And when's your work anniversary? It's coming up, isn't it?
August 1st.
Oh, just passed. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Ooh, does that mean you're going on sabbatical next summer, maybe?
No, because
you just went to England. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I also like to spread those out. It just is so hard it's a lot of work to prep to be gone for a long time, which is good.
Yep.
But you want the space in between it. So
100%.
It's not. Yeah. And then you have no awesome vacation for 9 years. You don't want that.
No.
Okay. So this week was all about Daniel chapter 4. You really honed in on pride. You had shared C.S. Lewis quote that we can spot pride easily in others, but have a harder time with ourselves, which I think is true for so many things. It's so easy to say something about someone else that you can't even see in your own life.
Yeah.
And you had shared several ways that pride comes out. Defensiveness, maybe you've responded defensively to being corrected. Control, or you were controlling, needing to run the show. Comparison, maybe you were comparing yourself to others and it felt better or bitter because of it. Ouch. Self-righteousness, maybe you had an attitude of self-righteousness, looking down on others for their beliefs, their politics, their behaviors. Self-glorification, maybe you took the credit and it wasn't even yours to take. Image management, caring more about appearances than reality. That really hits home in the day and age of filters and social media. And false humility, which is downplaying your gifts, but craving recognition. You had just shared that pride is often rooted in our hearts. And that is so true.
Yeah. And I mean, it's crazy because you can kind of go, well, I don't really have a pride problem. But then when you start to dissect it and you just see how it just creeps into every part of your character and you're like, oh, Lord, have mercy on me, Yeah. So the deeper you get into this, C.S. Lewis, who wrote a lot about pride. I mean, I could have just done a whole sermon of quotes of C.S. Lewis. I mean, it's just
good.
He dug in, but he just really saw pride as the center of sin. Like that is the crucial problem in our life, and you can kind of see why, because it just comes out in so many different ways in our character, and really it's that ultimate thing of saying no to God and yes to me. And that's the root of pride. So,
and I think as Christians, we do this, or as humans, but Christians as well, in so many ways. It's so easy when someone else maybe has a prideful issue in a larger, more visible way that you have to hear about it. And instead of comparing your pride to that of Christ and perfection, it's like, well, at least I'm not as bad as.
Yeah.
So I'm just so much better than, which is the opposite of humble.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just easy to do, man. Just look right at somebody else and say, well, I'm not that bad.
Yep.
It's not what God wants for us.
And I mean, I didn't have time in the message to share this, but there's that story of the tax collector and the Pharisee who come to the temple to pray, and the tax collector's like, have mercy on me, Lord, because I'm a sinner, and that's all he can do is just kind of beat his chest and say, have mercy on me. And the Pharisee's standing there going, I'm glad I'm not like that guy. Thank you, Lord, for not making me like that guy. You know what I mean? And just the pride of that. And Jesus, like, who do you think went home righteous that day? And I mean, obviously it was the tax collector, because he had that sense of, this is who I am, and I need you, Lord. Whereas the Pharisee was like, I'm actually pretty good, So.
And it's easy to do that. And actually, towards the end of your message, you were pretty vulnerable. I alluded to in the top of the message, and you really shared something, a story that you kind of had told us, at least in a communicators meeting, that you hadn't really shared with anybody before. And it was a powerful story of just you wrestling with pride in your own life as a young man. And so I have a question for you. One, if you didn't hear this weekend's message, please go back and listen to it, since we don't really rehash the message. We just carry on. But my question for you is, looking back, how did that season of breaking shape your ministry and the way that you lead today?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it left some scars of like, I never want to be like that again, and I don't want to treat other people that way. So I I would say I have a lot more grace for where people are coming from
Mm.
because of it. And I hope that I'm a lot more receiving of people's feedback too. I would hope that,
Okay.
as people say, "Hey, have you considered this?" or we talk about different issues, that I'm more open, you know. But it definitely opened my eyes to how big God's grace is. Part of the story that I didn't really get to share in the message is that I felt like I was lost. I felt like there was no way I could be saved. I was so I was so overcome with my sinfulness, and then God opening my eyes to how great His grace is just blew me away.
That's good. I remember, I know I've shared on here before, just being in high school and thinking there's just what in the world, like God's going to save even this person on death row that has done what to who kind of thing. And to
Yeah,
think like, I'm so much better than that. I'm so
yeah,
not like that. And
yeah,
then through adoption, just realizing the ugliness of my own heart and the
yeah,
darkness of what I could
yeah,
have, it can just rock you. It
yeah,
can rock you so much.
100%. Yeah, I've been reading some books recently from the 1600s, and they've been
Classic
really
Ed.
good. And but anyways, one of the books, the guy talked about that Jesus purchased a mountain of grace for us, and there's a mountain of grace in heaven that's piled up, and He can just pour it out all the time. And I mean, it's an infinite mountain, and we just get to draw on it and draw on it and draw on it. And I'm just such a cool image of like, yeah, I need to keep drawing on that grace, Lord,
Oh,
and
me
He's
too.
never going to run out. But just, we often talk about grace, but just to have this picture of it being like a a pile of grace that we get to draw on just really hit me. That thank you, Lord, we have that.
Oh, yeah. You actually even mentioned, you said, I can remember a time when I was cleaning a toilet to serve someone, and my heart literally thought, wow, look how humble
Oh my
I
goodness.
am.
Yep.
And, I think we can all be there. You also mentioned people potentially, like you mentioned several things, but one of them is maybe posting about our serving, which I think has, one time I was talking to Pastor Brian, and it has gone pretty icky on certain social medias where people do acts of kindness, and then they've actually taken it back
Oh
from
wow.
the
Oh
person
wow.
because their point was to go viral. Their point really was not to serve. So my question to you is, what practices have you found most helpful for catching pride in your own heart before it really takes root?
Yeah. Well, I I mean, as with any sin, I think the sooner you can catch it, the better,
Mm,
right? So,
yep.
James 1, he talks about this idea of like there's the little desire, and then it grows and it grows and it grows, and then it turns into sin. So can I cut it off as its root? So, like when my heart says, "Oh well, Ed, look how humble you are," I say, "Wait a second, are you being ridiculous again, heart?" You know what I mean? Like catch it as soon as I can, and just kind of laugh at the silliness of it, the ridiculousness of it. You know, so that's something I've found is helpful, is catch it as soon as I can. I talked in the message about just the confession of sin,
Mm-hmm.
and how important that is to dealing with pride, because I think, like you talked about with your adoption story, or just different things where you just start to see, oh man, that corner of my heart, man, that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
yucky, and that just helps deal with pride, because you're like, hey, no, I still got a lot to work on here. I remember a story of a Scottish preacher who got up one weekend before his congregation and was just weeping. And he's like, "Hey, this weekend I found out who the most sinful man in all of Scotland is." And he said, "I am."
Ugh.
And he had been a Christian for years. He'd,
Wow.
followed Christ for years. He'd nobody would have thought that, but he was just seeing in his own heart what was going on. And I think that's an important part for catching
Mm.
pride, is just going, yeah, I see it, so.
So would you say this mostly is happening in your quiet times when you're waiting and listening to God, or is it people that you trust who you've allowed to ask you hard questions to help call stuff out?
I would say a little bit of both, but
Okay.
I don't know for you, but for me, like sometimes it's just in reflecting after conversations I've had with people, and I
Yes.
go, "Oh, Ed, that was actually kind of prideful of you, the way you handled that conversation." You know what I mean? It's that reflection. Maybe it's later that day or the next day or something, and you just go, "Man, why did I say that? Why did I do it that way?" You know what I mean?
Yeah, when you had shared, well, I read them today for our podcast, but when you had shared the ways pride comes out, the first one you said is defensiveness. And I really just don't like being corrected, especially, I think maybe part of it is publicly, I don't know, but when there's a
Sure.
way,
Yeah.
I heard something recently like, it said something like the wounds from a friend can be trusted, where you want to know that deep down, I want to know that somebody loves and cares about me enough to pull me aside to say, hey, what are you doing?
Right. Right. Right.
But
Right.
not necessarily. The Bible says times and place for public correction,
Right.
which is not a ton in this day and age of how we live it out. But
Yeah.
I always want to hope that I've got friends in my life that would be willing to wound me.
Sure.
But we have a trusting relationship, because that's
Yeah.
really different than a keyboard warrior just sending you like a mean email after you preach, rather than just asking you a question that maybe would
Yeah.
get right to where you needed to go.
Yeah. And you would hope your friends would approach you in a way that would be loving and you would hear it,
Absolutely.
and that does definitely make a difference, in the defensiveness or that sense of like, but it's interesting how often people will, if you've had an issue and you bring it up, and people will blame the process rather than the content of the.
Ooh, you're
You know what I mean?
totally right.
Like they'll
Yep,
be like,
I agree
well,
with
if
you.
you had done it this way, then, and then the whole issue becomes about the process rather than the content of the hurt or
And
what.
if I'm doing that, it's probably me being defensive because
Yeah.
I don't want to have to admit that I'm prideful or that I'm selfish or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really good point, and I think that happens a lot.
Yeah.
I think that happens a lot of,
yeah.
well, it's the way that you did it, or it's the
Yeah.
tone that you had, kind of thing.
And whether it's intentional or not, I think it's a deflection. It's a way of getting it off of the root issue and onto something that, you can really push back against.
Well, yeah, because when we're being refined, when we're being sanctified, it's not usually pain-free.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like, no,
It's
I
like,
don't want that.
how does the gold get pure? It
Yeah.
gets closer to the fire, and it gets reworked that way. And that can be painful. And really, we see this happen with Nebuchadnezzar, because you kind of had said his humiliation was actually God's mercy.
Yeah.
You shared a quote, which was funny because it's a misquoted quote all of the time, and you
Yep.
researched it.
Yep.
And a lot of people attribute it to C.S. Lewis, but actually Rick Warren,
Yep.
who for many years was pastor of Saddleback, and I'm sure he's not just retired, but he is now
Yep.
retired, said humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So
Yeah.
it's not the I'm the worst person ever kind of idea. It's that I'm not fixated on self, that I could be others focused.
Yeah.
And
It's this freedom that comes from that,
That is freedom.
It's freedom, because if we're so obsessed with ourselves, and we are, I mean, that's sin nature. But that's slavery. But to be free of that and to think of yourself less is the freedom to see others, the freedom to see God. It's the freedom to live on purpose.
Well, and what a gift to get to see beyond where we would see on our own, to get to see people with God's eyes and
Yeah.
see his heart for his people,
Yeah.
because it's rough out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you don't have the hope and you don't have God giving you grace to be able to extend grace as you look upon others, then you're
Yep.
missing out on a lot.
Yep. 100%.
When you were sharing about Daniel 4, you talked about how Daniel was interpreting another one of Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, and so saw there was a towering tree stretching to the heavens, feeding and sheltering all of the earth. And then a messenger from heaven declared, cut it down. The tree crashed to the ground, and only a stump remained. Suddenly the stump became a man who lost his mind, ate grass, live like an animal, which is not what we would wish upon anyone. But if we're in Daniel 4 and we pick up verse 31 through, I believe, 33 or 34, it reads like this. Even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. Immediately, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from the people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle, which is crazy, and his nails like the claws of a bird. And then what's crazy about that to me is, was it this chapter or a different chapter where he had just been standing on top of his palace? And he was just like, look at my land.
Yeah. I mean, literally the verse before that. Yeah. He's looking up. And so even as the words were on his lips of like, look what I did by my glory, as the words are coming out of his mouth, God interrupts him.
Boom, right? Boom. Like that.
Yeah.
And that would be a crazy sight to see in a person. And what's even crazier, which we do this too, it was literally prophesied. Someone told him what it meant, said, if you don't change, here's what will happen. He didn't change. Then it happened. And people got to watch it. And you had said it would be a confused to mistake God's patience with permission. So how can we reframe maybe seasons of struggle or humiliation in our own lives or pride, whatever it is, and to see them as God's grace instead of just hardships?
Yeah, and this is a really great way to reframe the trials that we're walking through, and to just ask the question, God, what are you trying to teach me through this? God, where are you showing up in this? And at least for me personally, some of the really hard struggles that I've walked through have often felt so pointless. Like, Lord, I'm stuck in this situation. Why didn't you just take it away? Because this just doesn't. It hurts so much, but it doesn't seem to be accomplishing anything good. It just is holding me back from doing the things that I think I should be doing for you. You know what I mean? It just feels like it's not. It's ruining your purpose in a sense. It's ruining me for what you want me to do, because it's just so hard. And that's the human way of framing a trial. And God's like, actually, no, I'm up to something. And if we can, and I'm not saying this is easy. What I like to say is, on my good days, I can see it this way. And then on my bad days, I can't. But
that makes sense.
You know what I mean? But on my good days, I can go, okay, Lord, I can see that you're doing a work in my heart and others' hearts through this. And I can see that if I could somehow worm my way out of this thing, then maybe the work that you're trying to do would never get done. Does that make sense? Like it just
does.
says, and I'm like, okay, Lord, then do your work. And it gives then that purpose to the trial rather than the pointlessness of it, And so again, on my good days, that's how it feels, rather than on my bad days when I go, well, I'm really done with this, Lord. Like, can we move on? But yeah, that reframing is really helpful, I think.
And I have to say, for myself, some of the biggest journeys I've walked, the hardest roads, I don't think God told me while I was walking it what he was doing with it. And if people would come along and say, the Lord's going to use this in a testimony in a big way, I would think, I don't care. Yeah. I'm
exactly.
drowning here and I'm struggling. But there hasn't been a time he hasn't used it, but it's almost always come later where he's required that I trusted him without necessarily the understanding of the outcome, and I was talking to my mom recently, and she got injured at Crossroads fluke accident in June, right after camp, and she's still healing from it. She just started to drive again, started to walk again, total accident thing, and she has been having this conversation with God, like, what in the world? I'm retired and this and that. Like, what are you teaching me as I was laid up all summer? And she's a very active person. So for active people to become injured doesn't always fare very well. It's very difficult to just
And your mom's awesome. And there she is, like serving with the middle schoolers. She's doing God's work, quote unquote, in a
Yep.
sense, and she gets injured.
Taken out,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
And just crazy. And so there, I just think that's so applicable to so many is
Yeah.
sometimes on your good days, you have the good perspective to say, I trust you and you know you're up to other things.
Yeah.
And then some days my prayers were like, I just need your help.
Yeah.
I don't have the right
Yeah.
frame of reference for
Yeah.
this, So sometimes it's after that it happens.
Yep.
And you had shared in your message that pride can often blind us to our weaknesses. So my question is, what role do you think, and we touched on this earlier, the Christian community plays in helping us to see the blind spots and to walk in humility?
Yeah, so are you getting at like in growth groups or something like that?
Yeah,
Or
I think in doing life together, what is it supposed to look like in the Christian church where we build each other up and care for each other, call each other out if we're supposed to?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because Paul and Jesus and others, in the Bible, just feedback is a biblical thing. Like, Paul says, speak the truth in love, I mean, the writer Proverbs would say, iron sharpens iron. And it's, we are meant to, point out blind spots, and obviously there's a way to do that with humility. I mean, Paul talks about, draw somebody back gently, from their sin, so the Christian community should be that kind of community that is mature and able to talk about that together. Now, does it always work out that way? No, for sure not. But I think that the ideal that God has in mind for us, and really for all of humanity, but as Christians, we should lead the way, is that sense of, hey, we're working on each other together. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we're not meant to do life alone. So if you're listening to this and you just thought, wow, all of September, you just really pushed community and you really pushed groups, there's a reason for it, because we're not supposed to be doing life alone. And
Yeah.
God set that example long ago, with the early church doing life together. And I realize we have different kinds of jobs and different commuting and all that, but we're not meant to be solo. We're not meant to just receive from home. It's to do life together. And
Yeah.
it was so cool. Maybe it was at the beginning of September, you had some guys from your growth group on stage.
Yeah.
I know you changed each service, and I had gone to the 8:30 service. So I know I saw 3 guys that maybe other people didn't see, but that was cool to hear them share what happened, because you were in a group and it was some trusting and some caring and some showing of grace.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's amazing what happens in community together. And, I think it brings out the best in our character too, because we just become healthier together. And when we isolate, I think in isolation, our thoughts go to places that they wouldn't go if we were in healthy community together.
Agreed.
So I just think that being in healthy community together just not refine, it just brings out the best in us,
You shared during your message, you said God has been pursuing you. And you gave some examples. Maybe it's your first time back to church in years. Maybe God answered that prayer of yours years ago and you knew it. Or you've experienced that coincidence that's just too good to be true, but it was. And He's been knocking on the door of your heart, but you haven't fully surrendered. And I think a lot of us are guilty of this in life, because at the end of your sermon, you end up giving some ways to practice humility. We call it your walk this week. You gave 3 ideas. But if someone was listening this week and they needed to focus on one and they were at but I haven't fully surrendered space, which one of your walk this week would you say, man, start here?
Oh, number 1 for sure, which was remember who God is.
Okay.
I mean, and I talked about it just briefly, but man, we live in a concrete jungle, and I think we are numbed by the way that we live our lives to seeing God. And so, I showed this image of, the universe, and the earth was just
dots.
this little tiny dot, and I just think getting out in nature and looking at the beauty of creation just reminds us of the majesty of God, and opening the Word and just seeing how He is so wise reminds us about who He is as God. And I think, there's that thing, when you go on a hike and you get to the top of the mountain and it's just beautiful and you're just amazed by it, and you realize how tiny you are.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, it's exhilarating because you're like, this is so amazing. I think that's what happens in our hearts when we remember who God is. Like, we're like, man, I'm so small, but it's so amazing to see God and it's remember that who He is and what He's done, and it just that's the walking away from pride and walking into humility, and it just does a work in our heart that if is freedom, like we talked about earlier. It's freedom to live as we're meant to live. So I would just say, hey, if nothing else, crack open your Bible, or get out and go up the mountain somewhere, or just get out and see the ocean and see how vast it is, and just remember how small you are, and that's good. That's a good thing, because it'll be freedom that you don't hold the weight of the world on your shoulders. He does. You know what I mean?
I think there's a old Louis Giglio
Oh, yeah.
message
Yeah.
where he keeps saying, if the earth was
Was
the
the
size of a golf ball.
Yes, yes.
And I saw that one year at Passion
Yeah.
2001. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's a
A long time ago.
Yeah.
And it really helped frame the view of like, hey, you're significant, but you have to see how significant God is and not see yourself as number one. You gotta have Him on the top of your
Yeah.
pyramid of priorities, because if you can't see who He is and what He can do, and you can't see past yourself, then you're missing.
Yep.
You're
Yep.
missing the whole point.
Yep, exactly. And you're also placing yourself in a position that you're always going to be disappointed. Because you're trying to take on the weight of being significant in a way that you were never designed to be. And so you're always going to have that void because of that. Whereas if God takes that place of center in your heart, you're free to be who you're meant to be without that weight of, I've got to make myself significant.
I think we do that to other people sometimes too. As a parent, you can do that to your kid. As dating or married, you could do this to your spouse. As a kid, you could do this to your best friend, where you put this significance on them, that the weight that they're not meant to carry,
Yeah.
that really only God can carry.
Yeah.
And then you lose the sight of, like, the humility comes from just understanding the greatness of who God is.
Yeah.
And then you will just be disappointed every time. You'll
Yep.
disappoint yourself, and you'll certainly be disappointed by them, because they're humans not meant to,
Yep.
carry that. Oh, man, what a rich and honest conversation. I'm so grateful for your wisdom and vulnerability and sharing, and not just scripture, but from your own journey with pride, with humility. Is there one last thing you would want to share before we end our time together? Or do you feel like you just did when you said, remember who God is?
Well, there's one thing, and it's
Okay.
not to do with humility and
Great,
pride.
let's hear it.
It's a little different, because something I didn't get to talk about in the message is how Nebuchadnezzar keeps coming to Daniel, like
Okay.
through Daniel 1-4, and Daniel becomes like his God friend. Like, hey, you've got
Yes.
a connection with God, and I just want to encourage people out there, because I know a lot of people listen to this who you're at work, or you're you're in the community, and you might be the God friend at work, and there's somebody who keeps coming to you and saying, hey, I know you believe in God. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? You've got a significant place where you're at. Nebuchadnezzar went on a long journey to finally come to believe in God and to follow God, the one and true God. Daniel played a significant role in that. And I just want to encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're that God person at work, maybe your colleagues actually call you, hey, that's the Jesus person, or that's the pastor of the business, or whatever. I just want to encourage you, just keep going, because God's got you there for a reason. He had Daniel there for a reason for Nebuchadnezzar, and it took a long time. It took probably 30 years before Nebuchadnezzar finally crossed the line. But keep doing what you're doing, because it's an awesome privilege for what you get to see happen maybe at your workplace.
And I think that just ties in so well for the book of Daniel, because while humility, pride was honed in on this week, the past couple of weeks have talked about being bold in your faith and standing up for what you believe in. And so if God has given you that role, whether you asked for it or not, that's a good word, to embrace it and to trust God. And then, pray and ask other people to pray for you. If you were thinking, man, I don't have all the answers, awesome.
Yeah.
Because they don't need a prideful friend who acts like they do. They're looking for somebody who could teach them about the realness of who God is.
100%.
Yeah, that's a good word. Thank you. Hey, next week we have Brian returning with us as we dive into Daniel 5. But until then, thank you for listening. If this conversation encouraged you, would you share it with a friend who might also need to hear it? And don't forget to subscribe, because we've got more future episodes coming for you. And until next time, let's continue to choose humility, allow God to break and restore us as we trust that He is able to do all things and that all His ways are just. Tag your it. Thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you next weekend at Crossroads on campus or online for one of our 4 weekend services. To view our service times, make sure you check out our website at crossroadsgrace.org. Tag your it.